I was mid-sip of my morning coffee when Karen's high-tech drone swooped down like a hawk, spying on my ranch in Willow Creek, Montana, until I flashed a grin at it, knowing I held a 100-year-old secret that was about to detonate her entire HOA empire in a blaze of small-town justice. Hey, I'm Jake Harper, a third-generation rancher, and if you're new here, you're in for a story that'll have you laughing, cheering, and maybe even gasping, so stick around and drop a comment if you've ever dealt with an HOA Karen of your own. Now, let me set the scene. It was a crisp September morning in 2024, the kind where the air smells like hay and the sun paints the fields gold. My ranch, Harper Hollow, spans 200 acres of rolling hills, dotted with cattle, a couple of barns, and a stubborn old donkey named Hank who's been my best friend since I was 15. I've lived here my whole life, just like my dad and his dad before him. It's not just land, it's legacy. But apparently, that didn't mean a thing to the folks at Meadowview Estates, the fancy HOA neighborhood that sprouted up on my western border about 12 years ago. Meadowview is the kind of place where every house has a 2-car garage, identical mailboxes, and lawns so perfect they look like they were mowed with a ruler. The HOA there is run by Karen. Yes, the Karen, though her real name's Melissa. She's the self-appointed queen of Meadowview, armed with a clipboard, a fake smile, and a rulebook thicker than my grandma's recipe binder. I'd heard stories about her, fining people for planting the wrong flowers, banning basketball hoops, even measuring the height of someone's grass with a literal ruler. But I never thought she'd set her sights on my land. Boy, was I wrong. It all started 3 weeks before that drone incident. I was out fixing a fence near the western edge of my property when I spotted a group of guys in neon vests, poking around with survey equipment. They had orange markers and little yellow flags staked into the ground, 20 feet onto my side of the boundary. I hopped on my ATV, rode over, and asked, "Hey, what's going on here?" One of them, a guy with a clipboard and a grin like he was selling toothpaste, said, "Oh, we're just prepping for the solar panel install. Meadowview's going green, sir. Should be done in a couple of weeks." I blinked. Solar panels? On my land? He nodded, like I'd just asked if the sky was blue. Yup, part of the HOA's new sustainability initiative. It's for the community. I looked past him at the flags fluttering in the breeze, marking my field like they owned it. My blood started to simmer, but I kept my cool. "I'll be back," I said, and drove straight to the Meadowview HOA office, a little beige building with a sign out front that read "Community First," in curly letters that made my stomach churn. Inside, Karen was waiting for me, perched behind a desk like a vulture in pearls. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "I'm so glad you stopped by. We'll need your signature to finalize our energy sharing agreement." She slid a stack of papers across the desk, smiling like we were old pals. I didn't even touch them. "No," I said flatly. Her smile faltered. "No, you're not putting anything on my land. No, you didn't ask? And no, I'm not signing." Karen did that slow inhale thing, the kind people do when they're about to say something so ridiculous you'll want to laugh in their face. "Mr. Harper," she said, "I don't think you understand the opportunity here. This is a sustainable energy solution for the entire community. You'll barely notice it's there." I leaned forward, my voice low. Funny, because I barely noticed it was yours. Her face twitched, and I knew right then, this wasn't going to end with a handshake. Over the next few days, Karen and her HOA minions went into overdrive. My mailbox was stuffed with glossy flyers showing my field photoshopped with sparkling solar panels, captioned "Meadowview's Bright Future." They posted on the HOA's private Facebook group, which I wasn't invited to, of course, calling it a community innovation zone. They even held a solar info session at the Meadowview Clubhouse, complete with lemonade and selfies in front of a banner that had my hayfield in the background. I laughed at first, thinking they'd back off once they realized I wasn't budging. But then the truck showed up. I was in my kitchen, pouring a second cup of coffee, when I heard the rumble of engines. I stepped outside and saw a convoy of construction vehicles rolling in cement mixers, wiring trucks, the works. They started unloading right on my property, setting up junction boxes and digging trenches inside my fence line. My jaw dropped. These people weren't just planning, they were building. I grabbed my phone, called my lawyer, Sarah, a 68-year-old firecracker who once sued the county for repaving her driveway without notice, and told her everything. "Send a cease and desist letter," I said. "This is war." Sarah got to work, but Karen? She didn't even flinch. Instead, she upped the ante. That's when the drone showed up. Every morning and evening, like clockwork, This little buzzing pest would fly over my ranch, dipping low over my barns, hovering near my cattle, even peeking through my windows. I caught Hank, my donkey, staring at it like he was plotting revenge. I checked the HOA's Facebook group using a fake account. Don't judge me. And there it was, Karen's post, monitoring potential encroachments and safety hazards. Video documentation in progress. She was using her drone to spy on me, and she wasn't even trying to hide it. I'll admit, I was furious. But I was also curious. What was Karen so desperate to find? And why was she so confident she could get away with this? Little did she know, my great-grandfather, Old Man Harper, had left me a secret weapon, one that was about to turn her perfect little HOA world upside down. But I'll get to that in a minute. First, I had a drone to deal with, and a plan to make Karen regret ever crossing me. So there I was, Jake Harper, standing in the middle of my ranch in Willow Creek, Montana, watching Karen's drone buzz over my property like an annoying mosquito on steroids. That little flying spy was dipping low over my cattle pens, zooming past my barn, and even hovering outside my kitchen window while I was trying to enjoy my morning oatmeal. I swear, Hank, my donkey, was 2 seconds away from charging it. He's got a temper worse than mine. But I knew I had to play this smart. Karen thought she could intimidate me with her HOA rulebook and her fancy tech, but she had no idea who she was messing with, or what my great-grandfather had up his sleeve. I decided to dig deeper. First, I needed proof of what Karen was up to with that drone. I set up a couple of old security cameras I had lying around, one on the roof of my house, another by the barn. I even strapped a GoPro to Hank's halter and let him wander the edge of the property while munching on weeds. Let me tell you, that footage was gold. Hank's wobbly POV of the drone swooping in like a nosy hawk was the funniest thing I'd seen in years. But it was also the evidence I needed. The drone was flying way too low, under 50 feet, which I knew was a big no-no under Montana drone laws. And when I checked the HOA's Facebook group again, still using my fake account, I saw Karen had posted clips of my ranch with captions like, "Ensuring compliance with community standards #Meadowview. She was filming my property, my animals, even my niece, Emily, who was visiting and reading a book on the porch one afternoon. That crossed a line I didn't even know I had. Meanwhile, across the property line in Meadowview Estates, Karen was holding court at another HOA meeting. I heard about it from my neighbor, Tom, a quiet guy who lived on the edge of the HOA and had been sneaking me intel. He said Karen was rallying the residents, telling them the solar project was a beacon of progress, and that certain uncooperative landowners were trying to sabotage their eco-friendly future. She even had a PowerPoint slide with a photo of my field, labeled Future Solar Innovation Zone. The audacity of this woman. Tom said half the room clapped, but the other half looked nervous. Apparently, the project was already over budget, and some folks were starting to whisper about Karen's leadership. I couldn't help but smirk. She was digging her own grave, and I was about to hand her a bigger shovel. Back at the ranch, I called Sarah, my lawyer, to update her on the drone situation. Sarah's the kind of woman who looks like she's about to bake you cookies, but will have you in a legal chokehold before you can say grandma. She listened to my rant, then said, "Jake, that drone's breaking at least 3 state laws, privacy violations, agricultural zone restrictions, and low-altitude flight rules. And if she's filming your niece without consent, that's a child privacy issue. We've got her." I could hear the glee in her voice. Sarah loves a good fight, especially against someone like Karen, who she called a suburban dictator with a god complex and a Target shopping addiction. Sarah told me to file a complaint with the FAA and send her the footage. I did, and let me tell you, the FAA was very interested. They asked for timestamps, coordinates, even a statement about how the drone was affecting my livestock. Apparently, Hank's stress was a legal concern. Who knew? While I was on the phone with them, I glanced out my window and saw Karen standing on the other side of the property line, phone in hand, filming me filming her drone. She waved, her smile so smug I could feel it from 50 yards away. I waved back, knowing I had something she didn't, a plan. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk to the far western edge of my ranch, where the solar crew had started trenching. The ground was torn up, with cement posts already in place and wires snaking through the dirt. It made my stomach churn to see my land treated like a construction site. But as I stood there, kicking at a clod of dirt, I remembered something my dad used to say. If anyone ever tries to take what's ours, check the stone. He'd heard it from my great-grandfather, Old Man Harper, a grizzly old rancher who'd once sued a logging company for cutting down a single tree on his land. I always thought it was just a figure of speech. Turns out, it wasn't. I grabbed a shovel and a metal detector from the barn and started poking around near the old creek bed, where the survey markers had first popped up. After about an hour of digging through dirt and thistles, I heard a faint beep from the detector. I dropped to my knees, scraped away the soil, and there it was, a rusted, cast-iron plaque, half buried in the ground, anchored to a stone the size of a tractor tire. I brushed off the grime, my heart pounding, and read the inscription, Harper Hollow Covenant, 1923. Any construction on the western perimeter without written consent of the property holder triggers forfeiture proceedings. Coordinates filed with Willow County. I sat back on my heels and laughed so hard I scared a crow out of a nearby tree. Karen had no idea what she'd just walked into. While I was uncovering my great-grandfather's legal masterpiece, Karen was back in Meadowview, posting another update on the HOA Facebook group. She'd shared a photo of the solar crew working on my land, captioned Progress in Motion, #Sustainable Future. Comments were pouring in, some residents were cheering her on, but others were asking questions like, "Isn't that the Harper Ranch? And did he agree to this?" Karen replied with a winking emoji, "All handled. Don't worry." Oh, Karen. If only you knew. I called Sarah and read her the plaque word for word. She was silent for a moment, then let out a cackle that could have woken the dead. "Jake," she said, "this is a legal goldmine. That covenant's still enforceable. It's been on the books for 101 years, untouched. They didn't even run a proper title check before they started digging. Classic HOA arrogance." She told me to sit tight while she pulled the original filing from the county archives. I hung up, my mind racing. This wasn't just about stopping the solar panels anymore. It was about making Karen and her HOA pay for thinking they could steamroll me. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea, watching the solar crew pack up for the day. Across the property line, I could see Karen's house in Meadowview, her porch light glowing as she probably typed up another HOA newsletter about how she was saving the planet. I raised my glass in a mock toast. "Here's to you, Karen," I muttered. "You just triggered a trap that's been waiting for a century, and I can't wait to see your face when it snaps shut." I couldn't sleep that night, my mind buzzing louder than Karen's drone ever did. That rusted iron plaque I'd found on my ranch in Willow Creek, Montana, was like a winning lottery ticket, one my great-grandfather had hidden in the dirt 101 years ago, just waiting for someone like Karen to stumble into its jaws. I'm Jake Harper, by the way, and if you're still with me, you're in for a wild ride as I take on the Meadowview Estates HOA and their queen bee, Karen. Let's just say things are about to get messy. The next morning, I was up at dawn, feeding the cattle and checking on Hank, my donkey, who was still glaring at the sky like he expected another drone invasion. I couldn't blame him. Karen's little flying spy had been a daily nuisance, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be back anytime soon. While I was tossing hay, my phone rang. It was Sarah, my lawyer, her voice crackling with excitement. "Jake, I got the county records," she said. "That covenant from 1923? It's ironclad. Filed, stamped, and never challenged. Any construction on your western boundary without your consent means the HOA forfeits everything they've built, and the land under it, to you." I nearly dropped my pitchfork. "You're kidding," I said. She laughed. "Nope. They're in deep, and they don't even know it yet." While Sarah was digging through legal archives, Karen was busy in Meadowview Estates, doubling down on her solar project. My neighbor Tom texted me a photo from the HOA's latest newsletter, which Karen had emailed to every resident. It featured a picture of the solar crew working on my land, with a caption that read, "Meadowview's Green Revolution, coming soon." She'd even quoted herself, "We're committed to progress, no matter the obstacles." I snorted. "Obstacles? Lady, you have no idea." But what really caught my eye was a tiny note at the bottom. "Next phase begins this week, trenching expansion." They weren't stopping. They were going deeper into my property. I called Sarah back and told her about the newsletter. "They're not slowing down," I said. "They're digging more trenches as we speak." Sarah's tone turned sharp. "Good," she said. "Let them. The more they build, the more they'll owe you when this covenant kicks in." I'm drafting a formal notice of violation right now, certified mail, straight to Karen's desk. Let's see how she likes that with her morning latte. I could picture Karen's face when she opened that letter, her fake smile melting into a scowl. It felt good, really good. But Karen wasn't the only one making moves. That afternoon, I got a call from the FAA about the drone complaint I'd filed. The investigator, a guy named Mark, sounded like he'd seen it all. "Mr. Harper," he said, "we reviewed the footage you sent. That drone was flying under 50 feet over private property, filming without consent, and hovering over livestock zones. And the part where it zooms in on a teenage girl on your porch? That's a child privacy violation. My niece, Emily, had been the one on the porch, reading her book, oblivious to Karen's creepy surveillance." Mark continued, "The operator's in violation of multiple state and federal regulations. We're launching a formal investigation." I grinned. "Thanks, Mark. Let me know how it goes." I hung up, picturing Karen trying to explain to the FAA why she thought spying on a 14-year-old was community safety. While the FAA was building their case, I decided to keep the pressure on. I drove into town to the Willow Creek hardware store and bought a few no trespassing signs, the big, bright kind you can't miss. I hammered them into the ground along the western boundary, right where the solar crew was working. One of the workers, a young guy named Ethan, walked over, scratching his head. Sir, we were told this was HOA land," he said. I pointed to the sign. "Does this look like HOA land to you?" He glanced at the trenching, then back at me, and I could see the gears turning. "I'll talk to my boss," he muttered, and walked away. I had a feeling that crew was starting to realize they'd been lied to. Back in Meadowview, Karen was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. Tom sent me another update. She'd organized a community support rally for the solar project, complete with green balloons and a banner that said, "Meadowview goes green." She'd even hired a local high school band to play, which I could hear faintly from my porch, a tinny version of Sweet Caroline that made Hank bray in protest. Tom said Karen gave a speech, calling the project a triumph over rural resistance. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Rural resistance? If she wanted resistance, I was about to give her a masterclass. That evening, I sat down with the footage from my security cameras and Hank's GoPro. I edited it into a tidy little montage: Karen's drone weaving over my property, dipping low over my cattle, zooming in on Emily, all time-stamped and labeled with the exact laws she was breaking. I sent it to Sarah, who forwarded it to the FAA. Then I uploaded a copy to a private cloud drive, just in case. I wasn't taking any chances. As I hit save, I heard a familiar buzz outside. I stepped onto the porch, and there it was, Karen's drone, back for another round. But this time, it was bigger, shinier, with a camera that looked like it could read the label on my coffee mug from 100 yards away. She'd upgraded. I waved at it, knowing my cameras were catching every second. "Smile, Karen," I muttered. "You're on candid camera." The next day, Sarah called with an update. "The notice of violation went out this morning," she said. "Karen should have it by now. And I've got a meeting with the county clerk tomorrow to confirm the covenant's coordinates. If they match the solar grid's location, and I'm 99% sure they do, we've got a slam dunk." I thanked her, my heart racing. This was really happening. I was about to turn Karen's green revolution into a legal nightmare. Meanwhile, in Meadowview, Karen was starting to feel the heat. Tom texted me a screenshot from the HOA Facebook group. Karen had posted a rant about uncooperative neighbors and frivolous complaints, claiming the solar project was under attack by anti-progress forces. But the comments weren't all in her favor. One resident, a woman named Linda, wrote, "Karen, are you sure this is legal? That's the Harper Ranch, not HOA land." Another, a guy named Greg, added, "My cousin works for the county. He says there's a covenant on that property. You might want to check that." Karen's reply was a single emoji, a winking face. I shook my head. She was so confident, so clueless. It was almost sad. Almost. As the sun set over Harper Hollow, I stood by the creek bed, staring at that old iron plaque. I could almost hear my great-grandfather laughing, his gravelly voice saying, "Told you, kid. Never let him take what's yours." I patted the stone, a quiet promise to him, and to myself, that I'd see this through. Karen thought she was building a monument to progress, but all she'd done was wake a sleeping giant. And I was just getting started. The air on my ranch in Willow Creek, Montana, felt electric that week, like the calm before a thunderstorm you can feel in your bones. I'm Jake Harper, and if you've been following my battle against Karen and the Meadowview Estates HOA, you know things were heating up fast. That century-old covenant my great-grandfather left behind was about to become Karen's worst nightmare, and I was ready to watch it all unfold. By now, Karen had received Sarah's notice of violation. I knew because Tom, my Meadowview mole, texted me a photo of her storming out of the HOA office, her face redder than the tomatoes in my garden. But instead of backing off, she doubled down. I woke up the next morning to the sound of more construction noise, louder this time. I stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, and saw the solar crew had brought in bigger equipment. They were trenching even deeper into my land, laying more wiring, and setting up additional cement posts. I shook my head, almost impressed by her stubbornness. "Oh, Karen," I muttered, "you're making this too easy." While the crew tore up my property, I got a call from Mark at the FAA. "Mr. Harper," he said, "we've got an update on the drone investigation. The operator, Melissa, I believe she goes by Karen, has violated multiple regulations. We've got her on low-altitude flights, privacy breaches, and filming a minor without consent. She's looking at fines, possible license revocation, and we're considering criminal charges for the child privacy issue." I could hear the smirk in his voice when he added, "She posted the footage on her HOA Facebook group with hashtags like #CommunityWatch. Not the brightest move." I laughed. "Thanks, Mark. Keep me posted." I hung up, picturing Karen trying to explain her way out of that mess in front of a judge. Back in Meadowview, Karen was starting to lose her grip. Tom sent me another update. The HOA board had called an emergency meeting after several residents started asking questions about the solar project's legality. Apparently, Linda, the woman who'd commented on the Facebook group, had done some digging of her own and found a public record of my family's covenant at the county clerk's office. She brought it to the meeting, holding up a printed copy and demanding answers. Karen, according to Tom, brushed it off with a laugh, saying, "That's an outdated document. It won't hold up in court." But the room wasn't buying it. Greg, the guy whose cousin worked for the county, stood up and said, "My cousin says it's enforceable. You're risking a lawsuit, Karen." Tom said the tension was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. I wished I'd been there to see her squirm. Meanwhile, I was preparing for my own showdown. Sarah had confirmed the covenant's coordinates matched the exact spot where the solar grid was being built. Every trench, every post, every wire was on my land, and under the 1923 agreement, it was all subject to forfeiture. She drafted a full lawsuit, claiming not just the land and the infrastructure but also damages, legal fees, and restoration costs. "We're talking 6 figures, Jake," she said, her voice practically giddy. "Maybe more if the judge gets creative." I told her to file it, but first, I wanted to give Karen one last chance to back off at a public town meeting scheduled for that evening at the Willow Creek Community Center. The meeting was supposed to be a routine HOA update, but word had spread about the drama, and the place was packed. I walked in, wearing my best flannel shirt and a cowboy hat I dusted off for the occasion, and took a seat in the back. Karen was up front, her clipboard in hand, fake pearls gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She looked like she'd just stepped out of a Hallmark movie about a small-town hero, except this hero was about to get humbled. She started her speech, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. "As many of you know," she said, "our solar project has faced some challenges from a certain uncooperative landowner. But I'm here to assure you, we're moving forward for the good of the community." I stayed quiet, letting her dig her hole deeper. Then she pulled out a copy of Sarah's notice of violation and held it up like it was a piece of trash. "This," she said, "is an example of the kind of obstructionism we're dealing with. Instead of embracing a sustainable future, some people would rather cling to outdated claims and hold our progress hostage." That was my cue. I stood up, and the room went silent. Karen's eyes widened as I walked to the front, my boots echoing on the linoleum floor. "Mind if I say a few words?" I asked, not waiting for an answer. I turned to the crowd, my voice steady. "Let's get one thing straight. I didn't send that notice to hold anyone back. I sent it because your HOA approved construction on land they don't own, my land, without permission. That's not progress. That's trespassing." Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "Your solar grid is built on my family's ranch, land we've held for 5 generations. And here's the kicker, it's sitting right on top of a covenant filed in 1923 that says any unauthorized construction on my western boundary defaults to my ownership. That means the panels, the trenches, the wiring, it's all mine now." I pulled the county filing from my pocket and held it up. "This isn't an outdated claim, Karen. It's the law." The room erupted. People were whispering, some pulling out their phones to record. Linda shouted, "Is that true, Karen?" Greg added, "You never told us about a covenant." Karen's face turned the color of a ripe strawberry, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That document is ancient," she stammered. It can't possibly be enforceable. I smiled. Tell that to the county clerk. And while you're at it, explain to the FAA why you've been flying a drone over my ranch, filming my niece without consent. The crowd gasped. Karen looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I walked back to my seat, the room buzzing with chatter. Karen tried to regain control, mumbling something about pending legal reviews, but it was too late. The tide had turned. As I sat down, an older woman in the row in front of me turned and whispered, "Good for you, son. She's been a nightmare for years." I nodded, my heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and satisfaction. I just dropped a legal bombshell in front of the entire community, and Karen's perfect little world was crumbling. While the meeting descended into chaos, I stepped outside for some fresh air. The stars were out, twinkling over Harper Hollow in the distance. I thought about my great-grandfather, wondering if he'd ever imagined his covenant would be used like this. I whispered a quiet thanks to the night sky, knowing the real fun was just beginning. Karen had no idea what was coming next, and I couldn't wait to see her face when it hit. The fallout from that town meeting in Willow Creek, Montana, hit Karen like a freight train, and I, Jake Harper, had a front-row seat to the chaos. The Meadowview Estates HOA was unraveling faster than a cheap sweater, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride for my great-grandfather's foresight. That 1923 covenant was turning out to be the ultimate ace up my sleeve, and Karen was about to learn just how deep a hole she'd dug for herself. The morning after the meeting, I was out checking on my cattle when my phone started blowing up with notifications. Tom, my Meadowview insider, had sent me a link to the HOA Facebook group, where someone had posted a video of my speech from the night before. The clip of me holding up the covenant filing and calling out Karen's drone violations had gone viral, at least by Willow Creek standards. It had 300 shares and over 500 comments, with residents tearing into Karen. One comment from a woman named Susan read, "I can't believe we trusted her with our dues. She's put us all at risk." Another, from a guy named Brian, said, "My brother's a lawyer. That covenant's legit. We're screwed." I grinned, sipping my coffee. The court of public opinion was not on Karen's side. Meanwhile, in Meadowview, Karen was in full damage control mode. Tom told me she'd posted a lengthy statement on the group claiming the solar project was under attack by a coordinated smear campaign and accusing me of being an anti-environmentalist with a vendetta. She even said she had evidence of harassment, which turned out to be the footage of me waving at her drone. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. That same footage was now in the FAA's hands, and they weren't laughing. Mark, my FAA contact, called me later that day with an update. "We've reviewed the new drone footage you sent," he said. "She's doubled down on the violations, flying over your property again, filming without consent, even zooming in on your house. We're adding more charges, and she's looking at a hefty fine, possibly $10,000 or more." I thanked him, my mind racing. Karen's evidence was just more rope to hang herself with. Back at Harper Hollow, Sarah was putting the final touches on our lawsuit. She called me that afternoon, her voice brimming with excitement. "Jake, I filed the claim," she said. "We're going for everything: the land, the solar infrastructure, damages, legal fees, restoration costs, and punitive penalties for the drone surveillance. The total? Just shy of $750,000. My jaw dropped. $750,000? I repeated. She chuckled. "Yup. And that's before the judge adds anything for emotional distress. Karen's going to regret the day she ever heard the name Harper." I hung up, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a win, it was a landslide. While Sarah was filing the lawsuit, something even juicier came to light. I got a call from a county assessor named Rachel, who sounded nervous. "Mr. Harper," she said, "I need to confirm something. Someone from the HOA filed a zoning variance form, claiming your western boundary was donated to Meadowview as communal property." I froze. "Donated? By who?" Rachel hesitated. "It's signed by Melissa Karen. She submitted it last week." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just overreach, this was fraud. Karen had tried to erase my ownership of the land with a forged document. I thanked Rachel, hung up, and called Sarah immediately. "She's done," Sarah said, her voice icy. "That's a criminal offense. We're adding it to the lawsuit: attempted fraud, falsification of records." She's toast. In Meadowview, the HOA board was starting to crack under the pressure. Tom sent me a screenshot of an email from a board member named Dennis, who'd written to the residents, "Due to recent concerns, we're reviewing the solar project status and leadership." That was code for Karen's on thin ice. Apparently, several members had tried to hold a vote of no confidence, but Karen caught wind of it and issued a statement saying she was temporarily stepping down due to the emotional toll of constant attacks. No one bought it. The board voted anyway, and by the end of the week, Karen was officially out. Dennis called me, his voice shaky. "Mr. Harper, we'd like to meet to discuss a resolution," he said. I told him I'd think about it, but I already knew my resolution was coming through the courts. The next few days were a whirlwind. The solar crews stopped showing up, word had spread about the lawsuit, and no one wanted to touch the project with a 10-foot pole. I watched from my porch as trucks rolled in to dismantle the panels, pull up the wiring, and fill in the trenches. It was like watching a sandcastle get washed away by the tide. Karen's green revolution was crumbling, and I didn't have to lift a finger. But the real kicker came when the lawsuit papers were served. Sarah had them delivered to the HOA office and to Karen's house by a process server who, according to Tom, said Karen slammed the door in his face after snatching the envelope. I could only imagine her reaction when she saw the $750,000 claim staring back at her. While Karen was reeling, I got another call from Mark at the FAA. "She's been fined $12,000, he said, and her drone license is revoked. We're also referring the child privacy issue to local authorities for potential criminal charges." I thanked him, my mind spinning. Karen wasn't just losing the solar project, she was losing everything. Her reputation, her position, her perfect little HOA kingdom, it was all slipping through her fingers, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. She'd thought she could steamroll me, but she'd picked the wrong rancher to mess with. As the week drew to a close, I walked out to the western edge of my property, where the solar grid had once stood. The land was scarred but quiet, the air filled with the scent of fresh dirt and grass. I knelt by the old iron plaque, running my fingers over the inscription. "You really came through, old man," I whispered to my great-grandfather. I stood up, looking out over Harper Hollow, and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The battle wasn't over yet, but I knew I'd already won the war. Karen's empire was in ruins, and I was just getting started. The sun was rising over Harper Hollow, casting a golden glow across my ranch in Willow Creek, Montana, and I, Jake Harper, felt like I'd just won the Super Bowl of small-town justice. The Meadowview Estates HOA was a crumbling mess, Karen was gone for good, and my great-grandfather's 1923 covenant had turned out to be the ultimate checkmate. I've loved sharing this wild ride with you all, and I can't wait to hear what you think. So drop a comment below if you've ever faced an HOA Karen, or just let me know your favorite part of this story. And if you want more tales from the ranch, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more to share. The final showdown happened at the Willow Creek courthouse on a chilly November morning. I walked in with Sarah, my lawyer, who was rocking a sweater with little pumpkins on it, but had the fire of a dragon in her eyes. Karen sat across the room with her lawyer, a jittery guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She wouldn't meet my gaze, her usual smugness replaced by a tight-lipped frown. Judge Ellis, a stern man with a reputation for hating nonsense, called the court to order. "Let's get to it, Mr. Harper," he said, adjusting his glasses. "What's your claim?" Sarah didn't hold back. She presented the covenant, the drone footage, the FAA reports, and the bombshell Karen's fraudulent zoning form claiming my land had been donated to the HOA. The evidence was airtight, and when Sarah played the clip of Karen's drone zooming in on my niece Emily reading on my porch, the gallery gasped. Judge Ellis leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Ms. Melissa, can you explain why you thought it was appropriate to film a minor on private property without consent?" Karen mumbled. "It was for community safety, Your Honor." The judge's expression didn't budge. "Safety doesn't involve spying on children. Sit down." I had to hide a grin behind my hand. Karen was toast. The ruling was everything I'd hoped for and more. The covenant held. The 3.5 acres of land where the solar grid had been built, along with all the infrastructure, panels, wiring, posts, were now mine. The judge awarded $850,000 in damages for the trespass, restoration costs, and legal fees, then added $400,000 in punitive damages for the fraud, bringing the total to $1.25 million. He also ordered Karen to write a formal apology to my family, to be published in the Willow Creek Gazette for all to see. As the gavel came down, I felt a rush of pride for my great-grandfather. He protected this land a century ago, and now I'd honored his legacy. Karen's personal consequences were the icing on the cake. The FAA fine stuck, $15,000, plus a permanent ban on operating drones. The local authorities slapped her with a misdemeanor for the child privacy violation, sentencing her to 250 hours of community service. Rumor has it she's picking up trash on the highway in a neon vest. The county barred her from any future zoning filings, effectively ending her HOA career. As we left the courthouse, I saw her in the parking lot, staring at her car like she'd forgotten how to drive. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Back in Meadowview, the HOA was in shambles. The board officially disbanded after residents, led by Linda and Greg, voted to dissolve it entirely. They were done with the drama, the legal mess, and the $1.25 million bill they'd have to foot through their dues. A few folks reached out to me. Greg stopped by with a six-pack of local beer, saying, "You did us all a favor, man. That woman was a nightmare." I cracked open a bottle with him, and we toasted to new beginnings. Even Tom, my trusty informant, brought his kids over to see Hank, who brayed happily as they fed him carrots. It felt good to know I'd not only saved my land, but also helped my neighbors break free. I decided to make the most of my new assets. I worked with a local energy co-op to rewire the solar panels, and within a month, they were powering my entire ranch, my house, the barns, even a new water pump I'd been wanting to install. I sold the extra energy back to the grid, and when that first check came in, $200 for the month, I framed it and hung it in my kitchen. With some of the lawsuit money, I built a new barn on the 3.5 acres, painting it a bright yellow that glowed like a sunflower in the morning light. My cousin Ethan added a mural on the side, a giant cartoon of Hank kicking a drone out of the sky, with Harper Hollow, unbreakable since 1923, written below. It was a little petty, sure, but every time I saw it, I smiled. A few months later, I heard Karen had sold her house in Meadowview for pennies on the dollar and moved to a town 60 miles away. Word on the street was she tried to join another HOA board, but someone had shared the whole saga on a Montana community forum, and her name was Mud. I couldn't help but laugh. She'd build her own prison, and I'd handed her the key. As for me, I was back to my quiet life, tending to my cattle, sipping coffee on my porch, and watching the stars come out over Harper Hollow. The land was mine, every blade of grass, every fence post, and I'd fought for it with everything I had. One evening, as I sat with Sarah on my porch, she was knitting a hat that looked like it might eat someone. I looked out at the new barn, the solar panels shimmering in the moonlight, and the field stretching into the distance. "You know," Sarah said, her needles clicking, "you could have just let them have the land and moved on." I chuckled, raising my mug. "And miss all this? Not a chance." We clinked our mugs, the sound echoing across the ranch, blending with the soft rustle of the wind and Hank's distant bray. Harper Hollow was whole again, a testament to family, grit, and the kind of justice that doesn't fade.